everyone, my name is Sean, and in today's video, we're going to be building a Gravekeeper deck for Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution. Let's get started. First of all, we're going to start off with 13 starters, and our most important starter in this deck is Necrovalley Throne. This adds a Gravekeeper monster from your deck to your hand, but can also give you an extra normal summon during that turn. You don't really use the extra normal summon effect, but the add to hand effect is really good. Then we have 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Commandant. Commandant or Commandant allows you to discard it to add a Necrovalley spell from your deck to your hand. But we don't always want to rely on this effect to get our Necrovalley spell, so we also play 1 copy of Terraforming. We have quite a few extenders in our deck that like to have multiple monsters on the field, so we are playing also a copy of Instant Fusion just to help build our board presence a bit more, and it's going to allow us to access our extra deck a little bit easier. And then finally, we have 3 copies of Magician's Souls. Magician's Souls is a spellcaster card that can send 1 level 6 or higher spellcaster from your deck to the graveyard in order to summon this card to the field. This is really great because Magician's Souls can send one of your Gravekeeper cards to the graveyard, and then you can revive it later on. But also, it gives you a little bit of draw power for your deck. For extenders, we are playing 11 cards in the main deck. We first have Gravekeeper's Headman. This is a revival card for your deck. You can summon it to target 1 level 4 Gravekeeper monster in your graveyard and special summon it in attack or face down defense position. This card is fantastic in a way, but you don't want to play too many copies of it because you don't have a lot of extra normal summons in this deck. And this card doesn't have to be normal summon, it just has to be summoned. So you can revive it from the graveyard using a card like Rite of Spirit in order to trigger its effect. Speaking of which, we're playing 3 copies of this trap card here, a monster reborn that is unaffected by Necrovalley for the Gravekeeper archetype. Board presence is important for Gravekeepers. In order to do some of your effects, you want to have multiple monsters on the board, and so Rite of Spirit is going to help us with that. Now, a classic card that we used to use in Gravekeepers was Gravekeeper Spy, but being a flip effective now in this day and age is really slow, and we needed space in the deck for other things as well. So I've deliberately chosen not to use this card. This used to be the main card that you would always want to start off with the deck, but there's so many different forms of monster removal at the moment, it's really not worth waiting a turn to activate this, but I wanted to keep at least 1 in the deck for nostalgia's sake, I guess. Next, we have Gravekeeper's Recruiter, the brand new version of Gravekeeper Spy. When this card is sent from your field to the graveyard, you can add 1 Gravekeeper monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. Recruiter can basically search out any of your cards, keeps your hand nice and full, and this is why we play Instant Fusion, so we can link you off in order to trigger his effect easier. We then also play 3 copies of Gravekeeper Spiritualist. This is a fusion-based support card that when you have this card and any other Gravekeeper card on your field or in your hand, you can send them both to the graveyard in order to fusion summon out your Gravekeeper Supernaturalist. Gravekeeper Supernaturalist is a bit of an extender and a defensive card for your deck, and kind of like the boss monster for the deck. It gets a lot of an attack boost for times 100 equal to the levels of the monster that was sent for its fusion summon. It cannot be destroyed by card effects, and Necrovalley cannot be destroyed by card effects either. And then during your end phase of the turn, you can add 1 Gravekeeper monster or 1 Necrovalley card from your deck to your hand. So it does a lot for you. It's just a shame that it's a fusion monster in a way, because you're kind of going to go neg in order to go plus or break even, and I kind of wish it wasn't that way. So, other than the cards in the main deck, other extenders we have here are, we also have our Instant Fusion targets. Millennium Eyes is a defensive option, with Thousand Eyes being your removal option. And then because we're playing these level 1 monsters, and also Magician's Souls, we're also playing Link Karibo as well. For defensive options for the deck to protect your board, we've got Millennium Eyes as spoken with, and also Supernaturalist. But then our level 6 target is also going to be Gravekeeper Shaman. This card is searchable by using Recruiter's effect, but mainly you want to send it to the graveyard through Magician's Souls. And then when you can revive it from the graveyard, you will make sure that all cards, monster effects in the graveyards will be negated, and also your field spell cards cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and they cannot activate any other field spells. So the reason why I chose this card over some of the bigger Gravekeeper higher level monsters is because all the other monsters require you to summon them via a tribute summon in order to trigger their effect, whereas Shaman can just be revived from the graveyard and is immediately usable. The other field spell, we're doing 3 copies of Necrovalley, obviously, because this is a Gravekeeper deck. This locks off the graveyard. I really like the way this card works, or how this archetype works. Whereas zombies are all about coming back from the graveyard, Necrovalley and Gravekeepers are all about locking it off, so I'm protecting the tomb. And so Necro Valley makes it so that nothing in the graveyard can activate, or cards in the graveyard cannot be banished or moved around, or basically anything that happens in the graveyard is going to get shut down other than being sent to it. Then we also play one copy of Mystic Mine. Your people are going to target your Necro Valley. If it hurts their deck, they're going to keep on destroying it. So sometimes you want a card that's just going to help you when you're being more aggressive or going second kind of thing. Necro Valley is very much a going first card. You want it on the field before your opponent does any effects. Whereas if you're going second, Mystic Mine's a little bit better to shut your opponent down, and then you could stall if you want to get more resources to your hand. Now, there are so many different forms of removal in the game. In order to get rid of things like Necro Valley, there are people play Lightning Storm, people play Cosmic Cyclone, Dark Magicians even can get rid of this card quite easily. And so to help you with that and to kind of help the stun part of this deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment and 3 copies of Solemn Strike. Playing 6 copies of Solemns are very expensive, but they're almost like a necessary evil. Solemn Judgment can basically negate anything that happens, and you kind of never know what you're going to face in Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution, so it's kind of good to have an Omni negate in that way, even though it costs you half your life points. And then Solemn Strike, it can negate any monster effect, which is after spells and traps. Solemn Strike is the most common form of effects that people are going to use, and this can negate hand traps or so many other things as well, so Solemn Strike is pretty good to have as well. I keep exiting to the main menu, I don't know why. And then for removal options, in our main deck, we only have 5 cards or 5 spaces for removal left. I have deliberately chosen not to do Royal Tribute as much as I love this card. The thing with Gravekeepers is that it can't afford to be situational. This deck doesn't go plus very often. You need to make sure you maintain good card advantage and make sure that your cards are usable as soon as possible. Royal Tribute and a lot of other cards like Imperial Tombs and Necro Valley, Hidden Temples and Necro Valley, they're just too slow for this archetype. Even Gravekeeper Steel, it's just too slow. These cards require you to wait a couple of turns so you can set up your board, and if your opponent breaks your board, you can't even use these cards, and Royal Tribute kind of fits into that slot as well. And also there are many decks in the game right now which actually benefit from a card like Royal Tribute, and you cannot guarantee that your opponent isn't going to have a card that you're going to that isn't going to be benefited by having their whole hand discarded. If you play this against, say, someone playing Dangerous, for example, then they're going to be laughing at you because they'll be like, yep, thank you for all the pluses. This is ideally a card that you want to play when you have a side deck, so you can take it out if you don't need it, but we can't afford that in Legacy of the Duelist. So instead of doing 3 Royal Tributes, I'm doing 3 Torrential Tributes, because Torrential Tribute and Solemn Strike is pretty much a very, very powerful move to do. You can blow out all cards in the field and then kind of negate anything that's in the hand or the graveyard, so that those two really combine really well. Also, Torrential Tribute doesn't do anything to Supernaturalist, because he cannot be destroyed by card effects if Necro Valley is on the field, so your board gets a little bit of protection from that. And then also we have 2 copies of Gravekeeper's Descendant. This card can tribute 1 other face-up Gravekeeper's monster to target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy that target. This is a really good target to go with Gravekeeper's Headsman. Just normal summon Headman or summon Headman, however you want to. Bring back Descendant, and then you can pop a card on the field by getting rid of Headman and maybe bring it back later with Rite of Spirit. Now, all of our other removal options are in our extra deck. Take note that I haven't got any forms of spell or trap removal, dedicated spell or trap removal in my main deck because of deck space. I guess Descendant can kind of fill that role. He's pretty much your only option for that, but be aware that it's mostly in the extra deck. Feel free to modify the main deck if you want to adapt that or change that. So we got a lot of removal in our extra deck. We have 1 copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict. I forgot that by here I added a copy of IP Masquerader, by the way, so that's an extender that can do link summons during your opponent's turn. We have Nightmare Cerberus that can destroy a special summon monster in the main monster zone of your opponent. Nightmare Phoenix that gets rid of spells and traps. Underclock Taker, we don't see this card used very often, but it was very, very popular back in the day when link summon started off. So you can do once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and 1 face-up monster you control that this card points to, and the opponent's target loses attack equal to the target that this monster points to. So it reduces your opponent's attack to make them a little bit more easier to get over. We have Wee Witch Apprentice that gives all your dark monsters a boost, And then we have Black Luster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. Nightmare Unicorn in the deck as well, and also Topologic Bomber Dragon and Unchained Abomination. These cards are really good to run with IP Masquerena, so if you have enough extenders on the board, you can make these, and then IP Masquerena will make it so that they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and they can be a nuisance to your opponent as well. I just realized I haven't played Allure of Darkness in here. I feel very mixed about Allure of Darkness, but it probably is good enough to run, so throw 2 in there. It won't hurt to throw 2 draw cards into your ratio, so feel free to do that here. They won't be in the actual video that I have though, because the video that I have here represents this build, and this build is Magician Souls at 3, 1 Headman, 3 Recruiter, 3 Commandant, double Descendant, 3 Spiritualist, 1 Spy, 1 Shaman, 3 Instant Fusion, 1 Mystic Mind, 3 Necrovalley, 3 Throne, 1 Terraforming, 3 Riot Spirit, 3 Solemn Judgment, 3 Strike, and 3 TT. And then for our extra deck, we have 1 MER, 1 TER, 3 Supernaturalist. This is a bit excessive, you don't need 3 of these, but there really isn't too many options for this deck. I think actually in the video that I was actually recorded for you all, I was actually playing Super Polymerization and also the Utopia double combo. And like I said, you cannot afford to really have the chance to brick with this deck. So I took them out and I added more Supernaturalists. Not that you really need 3. What I will point out, by the way, is this card can be revived by Riot Spirit. So just keep that in mind. That's a really good thing to know. Link Karibo is in there. IP, Cerberus, Phoenix, Underclock, Taker, Wee Witch, BLS, Nightmare Unicorn, Bomber Dragon, and Unchained Abomination. So let's show you how this deck works in action. We've got a nice tool for you here, a little bit of a back and forth gameplay here, and so let's go into our gameplay here. That looks like it's been cut off. I apologize. Let me go back. That's like a turn to this one here. We'll start from here, and I think it's around 4 minutes in, maybe a little bit more. That was a weird duel I had. Don't worry about that one. And here we go. So starting on the duel here against Johnny Creampuff. I think he got to go first, which is obviously not what you want for this deck, but it's okay. So he sets 1 card face down on the field, and this deck really kind of struggles sometimes with building up its board. Once you kind of get your board going, you really got to keep your board going, because this deck doesn't have a really good combat factor. This deck could really do with like a win condition as well, and that's why I try to fit in things like Super Polymerization, the Utopia double combo. I kind of even wanted to do like a Prilipant Vertic Anaconda with Neos Fusion and try doing all of that. But like I said before, you can't really afford to break with this deck. And I think we actually see a little bit of what happens when that happens in this deck here. So my opponent here is playing the Abomination deck type, a really good deck type. I did an Archfiend deck type profile a few days ago, about a week ago I believe, and the whole time I was building Archfiends, I was thinking to myself, man, I really just wish I was playing Unchained. Unchained is very good. It's got lots of searchers, it's got lots of synergy cards, and it can be a real pain to deal with because they all benefit off of being destroyed, and they can destroy themselves whenever they want to. So it's a really good card. I don't necessarily agree with Phantasma in this deck though. I don't think everybody. It's harder to know if everyone's going to play link-based decks in this game. So, like, if you play against like a Dark Magician player or a Blue Eyes player, they might not be playing any links whatsoever. And there's a lot of decks that don't play links at the moment in this format. So I don't think Phantasma is a good main deck card, but it is a decent card nonetheless. Anytime you're playing against a link-based deck, Phantasma is always a good hand trap to have because he can fix your hand. So, into our first turn here, my opponent is going to start off by using Rakea's effect. Rakea has the effect of you can target 1 card you control and destroy it, and then I believe you get a benefit of it. I'll have to read it as well, but he's going to chain Traptic to it. Now I believe through this effect what he is doing is targeting his face down card to destroy it, if I'm not mistaken. And then he's also going to go in and search out Torrential Tribute. Torrential Tribute is a really good card to play in the game right now. This card just deals with a lot of boards, and it can do it during your opponent's turn to stop your opponent from going too heavy in the combos. So it's going to be really good to do. So he destroyed Rakea by its own effect. I'm not sure why or what the benefit of that was. Maybe it has a graveyard based effect for later on. But we're going to start off by using Instant Fusion to go and get Thousand Eyes Restrict. So a lot of his monsters really enjoy being destroyed. So Thousand Eyes Restrict can remove a monster without actually destroying it. So it's a good option to have here. And in this situation, you kind of wish you had multiple copies of it, because it will be really good throughout the whole of this game. So I'm just having a read of what these cards do. Abominable Unchained Soul, if this card is destroyed, can come back during the end phase, and that could be really hard for us to deal with because we don't have our Necro Valley. But the other card I think has a quick effect, can do it can use your opponent's monsters to do a link summon. So it's kind of like a super polymerization, but it does a link summon instead of doing a fusion summon. Now our hand here isn't that great. This is what I mean about the deck being slow sometimes. You can't right now we have Spiritualist, we have cards in the hand that we can use for fusion summoning, but without Necro Valley there is no reason to go into Supernaturalist, and that's kind of a bummer, in my opinion. It isn't too hard to get to Necro Valley in this deck, but there are going to be times when you don't have it, and then right now Spiritualist is just a vanilla 1500 monster because it doesn't do anything else. So I normal summon it with the intention of thinking, yeah, there's a Torrential Tribute on the board, so we might as well sacrifice something because we know he wants to use it at some point. If I didn't put pressure on though, he wouldn't have used the Torrential Tribute for now, so we really want him to do that. So I believe when his Unchained Soul was destroyed, it summoned out Abominable Unchained, and so that's now on the field, and now he's got a 3k beater. And that card, be careful of that card. When that card is summoned, it can destroy a card on the field by discarding one. Obviously, he doesn't have a card to discard right now, so I'm a little bit safe from it. But be aware, it will pop one of your cards as well. So try to make sure you can play around the effect as best as you can. He now attacks directly for 3000, and this is another thing with Gravekeepers. They do a lot of reaction to when your opponent makes an effect. But if your opponent doesn't do anything and just attacks you, people can do a lot of damage to you very quickly. Fortunately, we have Spy, and then we also drew into a copy of Necro Valley, so we do have the graveyard now locked off, which is going to help us a little bit in this matchup, because they do like to use the graveyard quite a bit. Gravekeeper Spy is going to have 2500 defense, very, very thick girl, that Spy, and but not quite enough, because Unchained Soul has 3000 attack, so she will get destroyed. So if you don't know what to go for with Gravekeeper Spy, or you don't know what you're trying to set up, always go for Gravekeeper's Recruiter. It's the easiest card to go for because it just floats. So if it gets sent to the graveyard, you don't have to worry about it too much because you're not going to lose card advantage, because you'll get your search off still. And we also have Recruiter Descendant in our hand. So if we want to destroy a card on the field, we can do that. So that's the plan at the moment. So we go to the end phase, and now we draw into a card, and we get double or nothing. And yeah, I always draw this card. I hate drawing this card so much. For decks that really need a win condition, it can be really, really helpful, including this one. But unlike, say, like the Harpy deck that I posted yesterday, this deck doesn't consistently make Utopia the Lightning, so I took it out. I don't think, not Utopia the Lightning, but Utopia number 39, and then Utopia Beyond. It doesn't consistently put 2 level 4s on the board, and even when it does, you want to use one. You might want to use it for Supernaturalist, you might want to use it for Descendant effect. It's really, really hard to justify going into your edge deck sometimes. But that being said, I didn't want to play a card like Pot of Extravagance in this deck either, because Pot of Extravagance will banish a lot of your resources, and then even though Pot of Extravagance gives you some nice draw power, then you have to get all your removal into your main deck, because you can't count on it being your extra deck. So your spell and trap removal has to take up a slot in your main deck, and that really hurts the consistency of this deck, because your ratios get affected by having to squeeze more into it. This wouldn't be so bad if Gravekeepers went plus a lot, like Burning Abyss does, where, not Burning Abyss, but Subterrors do, where a lot of their cards are either searchable, or they can play a lot of good floodgates, like there can be only one, and they can slow down your opponent quite significantly. But this deck doesn't do that really. This deck is more of a, isn't really a stun deck, it's more of a kind of like a control variant, hybrid variant with some stun cards. So next we have Gravekeeper's Descendant. I'm going to use the effect to pop his Abominable Unchained Soul and get rid of that card, and we're not going to chain to it, and we're happy to get rid of that card. It's going to try and revive itself in the end phase, but that's fine because we have the graveyard locked off, so that card will not be coming back unless he gets rid of my card first. And you saw my opponent did Trap Trick into Heavy Storm Duster. That's why we play Solemn Judgment in this deck, because you need to have that Omni Negate just to counter these random answers every now and then. You can't depend on Imperial Tombs in the Necro Valley or a specific kind of negate in order to serve your purposes, because you don't know what your opponent's going to use. People love to experiment in this game, and that's really good. That is a really good thing, but Gravekeepers are definitely an anti-meta deck, and with the meta being so wide, they struggle a little bit more. If the meta was very restrictive and everyone was playing like a graveyard-based deck, like the Orcust, Sky Striker, Thunder Dragon, what else was in that format? Solomon Great format of 2019. If people were playing a format like that, then Gravekeepers would do a little bit better than in a very, very varied format like this one. Now, while we are carrying on with the game and my opponent plays part of Extravagance, I want to talk about some other variants I tried of this deck. Now, what's a real shame about this deck is I feel like playing Gravekeepers as a stun deck doesn't utilize some of the cards to full potential. If you ever read of the cards, you might notice that certain cards like Gravekeeper's Recruiter, the one that goes to the graveyard and then searches you out a monster, aren't once per turn effects, which is really, really good if you can abuse it, because you can get a lot of card advantage of that card quickly. I noticed that being dark spellcasters mostly, except for Gravekeeper's Commandant, for some reason he's an Earth. I want to talk about that in a second as well. What I noticed is that they have a lot of support, particularly in the extender section. You can play Dark Magic Veil to pay 1,000 life points to summon a dark spellcaster from your graveyard or hand to the field. You could play Magician's Restage, which summons out a level 3 or lower spellcaster monster from your graveyard. That's fantastic because you can get Magician's Souls back, and then you can draw, or you can get Recruiter back and get a search. There are so many ways to open up this deck and do more things with it, but the less focus you have on Necro Valley, the weaker a lot of cards become. Also, even with Gravekeeper's Recruiter's effect itself, when it goes to the graveyard, the cards that you have as an option to add to your hand aren't going to easily hit the field afterwards. So even if you do abuse it and get a lot of search into your hand, whatever you add to your hand isn't going to necessarily be used straight away, because unless you get Gravekeeper's Commandant, because they have to be summoned to the field in order to do their effects. And even if you do go for Gravekeeper's Commandant then ditch him to get Necro Valley, doing that kind of contradicts with the theme of the idea of using all those extender cards, because you can't summon out of the graveyard using those cards when Necro Valley's on the field. I guess you could just put Necro Valley in your hand and hold it and wait until you kind of build your board, and I did consider doing that, but I ended up going against that idea. Another really good card for Gravekeepers is Selene. Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. It is the link-free spellcaster monster, which gets spellcasters equal to how many spells you and your opponent have on your field and in both your graveyards, and then you can remove 3 counters to summon a spellcaster monster from your hand or your graveyard into defense position to a zone that card points to. And that's just another way to abuse Recruiter, because you can get 3 monsters on the board, make Selene using Recruiter's effect, get a search off Recruiter, then use Selene, summon another card to the field, and then go into a Link 4, and then you've got a Link 4 play. It's actually a really great ascender for the deck, but Necro Valley stops you from making the full use of that effect. Man, it's a real shame. I had some really good ideas with this deck. Instant Fusion was better in this deck when you play it with the extenders. You could go Instant Fusion, get El Shaddai Winder, then you can make your Selene play, and then you can summon that Winder, so you have a way to stop your opponent from special summoning, which is kind of the theme of Gravekeepers, because you want to stop your opponent from doing too much. So it's really, really good for that. Yeah, there's a lot that you could do with this deck, but it kind of contradicts the theme of Necro Valley and trying to use the card Necro Valley. Necro Valley also is a really good card. I do love Red Necro Valley. I think it's a field spell. It's one of the best stun field spells in the game, and I play it in other decks like Pendulum, but it doesn't do a lot to benefit you. Giving your cards 500 attack and defense doesn't really help you enough in nowadays. And the fact that you're locking off your opponent's good, locking their graveyard off is good, but if it doesn't hurt your opponent at all, and say they're playing a deck that doesn't care about their graveyard, then the card is kind of weak. It doesn't do a whole lot for you, and it's not benefiting you in any way. If it had like a searcher effect, say, when you activate this card, you could add a Gravekeeper card from your deck to your hand, then it would be so much better, because then it won't be dependent on your opponent's deck. You could just play it as one of your own cards. So in the gameplay here, we're going basically back and forth, and this is what a Gravekeeper game is like. It's a lot of little poking. You want to simplify the game state so your opponent doesn't have a lot to do. and you just want to keep on trying to do damage as you can. I'm down to 500 damage. My opponent's got 4,300 damage, and oh, that's another thing I wanted to talk about with this deck. Man, I mean, the cards are not new. The cards are quite old now, but all the newer quote-unquote support for Gravekeepers are so bad. Things like Imperial Tombs of Necro Valley, Hidden Temples of Necro Valley, those newer cards, Gravekeepers, Supernaturals, even that I don't like. Whoever designed those cards never played Gravekeepers in their life. Oh my god. When I remember reading those cards, I was like, those are what Gravekeepers need. They do need those kind of cards, but they're so poorly designed. Like, they're really unplayable for a slow deck like this. Gravekeepers need Omni Negates, so Imperial Tombs is really good because they have an Omni Negate. But to have it so that you only can use it when you have Necro Valley and a Gravekeeper monster on the field is really, really bad. And then cards like Imperial Tombs of Necro Valley is also what this deck needs. In fact, one of the best cards that used to be in a Gravekeeper deck was a banned card called Vanity's Emptiness, which stopped both players from special summoning until a card was sent to the graveyard, and then it'll blow itself up. And that card not being in the game is really, really missed for a stun deck like this, because it's just generic floodgate style effect where it stops everybody from doing what they want to do, and then you can slow the game down significantly. And to have their own archetype based version of that card is really, really good. But again, not only can you activate a card when you have a Gravekeepers monster and Necro Valley on the field, but if any of those cards leave the field, it blows itself up. So not only does your opponent get a plus or break even for getting rid of one card, they get a free extra card to get rid of. And for Gravekeepers, you can't afford to be spending or losing cards like that. It's not worth the gamble at all, because if your opponent breaks your board, you're just going to lose because you haven't got enough cards to play the game. And that's kind of why I'm iffy about Supernaturalist as well. I think Spiritualist is a nice card, and yeah, it's good that it can contact views by using cards in your hand and on the field, but Supernaturalist is only okay. It's not really great in a boss monster. To kind of illustrate this, if you look up a lot of modern Gravekeeper decks, a lot of modern Gravekeeper decks only play 3 copies of Commandant, and then the whole deck is a Red Eyes Dragoon deck. And for those who don't know what Red Eyes Dragoon does, do yourself a favor, go and look it up, because if you're going to play a game like Master Duel, you're going to be seeing Red Eyes Dragoon quite a lot. It's a fusion monster with an Omni Negate on legs, and it's very hard to get rid of. And so people just play that with Gravekeepers, and it's not really a Gravekeeper deck anymore. But I understand why they do that, because Gravekeepers don't do a whole lot for the current format. Even a card like Descendant isn't that good for a slow format. I don't think Descendant was ever really that good as a pop card. It's okay as removal, and the fact that it's generic is nice, but the fact that you're losing your board presence to destroy a card in the field is really, really bad. And I guess you could do Gravekeeper Spy, search it out, and go from there. But Gravekeeper Spy herself is still really slow. I don't necessarily agree with playing any kind of flip effects in this day and age, unless the cards that you're playing as flip effects really take a big advantage off of it, kind of like Shadows do, where Shadows kind of have effects for the graveyard and their flip effects as well. Both players down in this duel are down to 500 life points. I know I've kind of gone on a rant here, but to let you guys in on a secret, I built this deck. Took me 2 days to build, and I'm kind of pissed off that it took me this long to build, because the deck is so bad. Oh man, it's in such a weak state compared to what it used to be, and I really, really love Gravekeepers. I've always loved the card arts. I really love the design. Gravekeepers Assailant used to be one of my cards, and when I watched the GX cartoon and I found out that Gravekeepers Assailant is actually a girl, I was like, what? My waifu, let's go. I was like, yeah. And not to get like all like political or like throw isms in there the game, but being a brown skinned man myself, seeing some cards in your favorite card game which have a similar skin complexion to you, yeah, hell yeah, I'm gonna play that. I mean, because other than Gravekeepers, what do we have? He's just Karate Man, and like, yeah, hi dad, hey, yeah, thanks Karate Man, appreciate that. Oh, Mataz of the Sapper. Mataz of the Sapper is really cool. I used to love that card. That card looks really cool. Little ninja samurai. So I've always loved Gravekeepers. I love the fact that they're anti-meta, because I was historically an anti-meta dude. I never really want to play anti-meta. I get criticized for focusing on meta decks nowadays, But when I used to start off, I used to play anti-meta all the time. I always wanted to be the guy that beat the meta and be like, yeah, he's so original and whatnot. Do yourself a favor, be open and try to play all types of decks because, yeah, you learn so much more in the game when you come with an open mind rather than restricting yourself to playing only certain decks. Because even if it's your favorite deck, still try to play other decks because you gain so much knowledge and experience by actually playing them firsthand. And you get a better understanding of the game and what little nuances there are with the card rulings and so on and so forth. So yeah, don't follow my footsteps. I could have been a lot better at this game if I had my head out of my ass beforehand. So it is what it is. But yeah, this is kind of turned into a podcast. The ranting hour of Sean with about Gravekeepers. Why Gravekeepers are bad. Yeah, don't know what else to say really. That deck, I used to love this deck, but the game is just not where it used to be anymore. So the game state right now, if you need it to be explained, is he has 2 big monsters on the board. I have 1 monster and a Mystic Mine, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I did manage to get him down to 500, which is nice. I don't remember if I win this game or not, but I at least wanted the footage to be decent enough to display what this deck can do for you. For those who do want to play this deck, they can see what it's like in action and see some of its strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's a funsy deck. I could even call it a legacy deck nowadays, but I don't see many people even playing Gravekeepers anymore. Because I see people playing Necro Rally more than I actually see people playing Gravekeepers. I know Gravekeepers is a good deck in Duel Links, I think, or at least at one point they were. I know I played Speed Duels when Speed Duels were released at the beginning, and Gravekeepers were one of the early decks for that, so I enjoyed playing that, and they were good in that format. But nowadays, I mean, who are we kidding here? This deck is what, like, I don't know when this deck came out, but it's over 10 years old. It's like over 15 years old. The game's just moved on way too much, and there's just way too many forms of generic forms of monster removal. I know in back in the day when Gravekeepers were good, or quote unquote good, they were never like a top tier deck, but they were always like a deck you prepared for tournaments, because if someone played it, then you had to be prepared for it. And I think it was around like the first time Monarchs was released, and people were playing like Monarch decks for the first time. Monarchs got like a second wind when their structure deck came out, and they got a whole lot of Monarch cards like Erupt, their field spell, and some of their continuous spells they got as well. But those little baby Monarchs as well that you can summon and give you extra summons. They weren't out originally. Originally it was just the Startos, Mobius, what's the thunder one called? Zapdos. We'll call it Zapdos. Ryza, Grandmark, Dark one. What's the dark one called? Caius. And I think that's all of them. And I don't even think Kuraz was in it. Zaborg. Zaborg is what it is, not Zapdos. Zaborg. And when those cards were out for the first time, people used to play them quite a lot, and Gravekeepers were one of the decks that used to go up against them. They would body Gravekeepers most 9 out of 10 times, because Monarchs back in the day were just so good at resource management. Every time they tribute summon, they went plus. But at least back then, the game was slow enough so that if your opponent didn't draw into their out, like play Mystic Spice Typhoon or Heavy Storm or Giant Trunade or something like that, then your deck could at least play for a couple of turns, and that's how you kind of got your wins in, because you just try to control the board and slow the game down, and then hope to do enough damage before your opponent breaks your board, and then you have to rebuild it again. But nowadays, you could just summon Nightmare Phoenix, woo, and you just pop a card on the field, and yeah, a deck that used to run a field spell like this is just too slow for the current format. I would love to see some actual proper legacy support for Gravekeepers, something a lot better than what they've already gotten. I really would love to see that can make a revival, but I don't see it happening. All the decks that Konami likes to focus on seems to be extra deck based decks, and yeah, I think they're going to throw a lot of love and support to Dark Magician, a lot of love and support to Blue Eyes, but some of the older archetypes just aren't going to get that much support. And as more kind of floodgates get taken out of the game, like Lefanity's Emptiness, for example, then more decks like this just become weaker and weaker. So what we're doing here at the moment, we're still playing Gravekeepers, still going through. The deck isn't hard to understand, so hopefully you guys don't mind that I'm not doing a play-by-play and saying this is what it's doing, this is what it's doing. A lot of these cards I've played before, and a lot of the Gravekeepers cards are very, very simple. It's summon this, do this, tribute this, do this. You know, it's that kind of deck. It isn't really complicated. There isn't a lot of depth to it. It's just play your cards the best you can and try to push through your opponent's resources and outsmart them. If you can outsmart your opponent, then you're laughing. I think my opponent just gave me the game here. I don't think that was the right idea. He just cleared off his monster on the board, and now, well, I was going to go for Spiritus into a fusion summon anyway, and so he's not going to be able to trigger any of his graveyard effects. I think he was planning to, but yo, Necro Valley, my friend, that's not going to work, I'm afraid. At least I think it's not going to work. Am I right? Yes, I am right. Of course I'm right. Yeah, that's his game, and this is what they do. They attack. I don't think I even summoned Supernaturalist once in this game, which is really, really sad. Maybe I did. I wasn't paying attention. So, guys, there's a Gravekeeper deck. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching as always. I'll see you soon. Take care.